Today we are starting the second half of Chapter 2. So we are doing Chapter 2, Section 4 today. Tomorrow we will go with 2.5. Then we get a little break for that middle of the week craziness. Friday we will finish off the chapter with 2.6. Do you guys have any questions on our schedule today?
Not the schedule for today, but when is that junior class meeting?
Alright, so two very important vocabulary terms today. The first one is vertical angles. Vertical angles are two angles that are not adjacent and whose sides are formed by intersecting lines. So if you take two lines and you cross them, we're talking about the angles that are not right next to each other. So do you see how like this one and this one would be right next to each other? So not those two. This one and this one would be right next to each other. So not those two. This one and the one across. These are vertical angles. Now there's another pair too. These are vertical angles. So when two lines cross each other, they're the angles not right next door, across the intersection from one another. Okay, so those are vertical angles. I like to think of vertical angles. Vertical starts with a V, and when you trace these angles, it looks like you have like two V's like pointing at each other. Those are vertical angles, all right? And then a linear pair is two adjacent angles whose non-common sides are on the same line. So if you have a line and you have two angles that are adjacent, those are called a linear pair. They're the exact same thing that we did last week. We just called them supplementary angles. There was the bonus one on your quiz where you added the two angles equal to 180. Same thing. Now we just have a fancy name for it. It's called a linear pair basically because they make a line. What are your questions? I do not. Any other questions? So as you're writing these, you can draw pictures with them. So if two angles form a linear pair, they're supplementary. I'm actually going to use the same diagram for both of these. So linear pairs, they make a line. So like the top two, they're supplementary. So if that one's 80, that one's 100. That's kind of the easiest pair to show, hey, they add to 180. Same looking picture though. Now I'm going to focus on two other angles. The ones across from each other are congruent. So I marked them congruent on the last one, but now you actually have it in writing. So when you have two lines that intersect, a lot of things are happening. The angles next door add to 180. The angles across are congruent. So if I gave you one of the angles, technically you could find the other three angles at the intersection because of all these relationships. You have three choices here. Vertical angles. So if they're across from each other, when you have two lines that intersect, they're vertical. Those are the ones that form the V's like they're pointing at each other. A linear pair, they've come together to form a line, and then anything else is neither. There is one of each on the board. Does anyone think they know which one kind of matches with which? So like, let's just look at A then. This angle and this angle. Those are vertical angles. It's like the two V's pointing at each other. Good. Good. And then part B, see how they make this line when you put them together? That's a linear pair. Linear like line. And then C is neither. It kind of looks, I mean, like they do make a line and they are across from each other, but this little like cutout angle is what's messing you up on both of them. So this is a neither. Good. Any questions? So you can draw this real quick. So the measure of angle 1. Do you see how there's a big 1 in that angle? It doesn't have a degree symbol next to it. So a lot of students will mistake this as a 1 degree angle. It's not. It's just the name of the angle. This angle is angle 1. We're trying to find the measure of angle 1. So when I put angle 1 together with this 140 degree angle, what do I make? This is 180. It is a linear pair, so when they add together, I should get 180. So what can I do to find out how much I need to make 180? Subtract. So we can just do 180 minus 140, and it would be 40. Good. All right, go ahead and draw this one as well. Now we're looking for the measure of angle 2. So when you're drawing this, just draw 2 lines that cross each other, 2 intersecting lines. Okay, so what do I know about these 2 angles?
They're the same.
They're the same. These are vertical angles, and vertical angles are congruent. So what's the measure of angle 2? 37 degrees. Good. Don't make that harder than it needs to be. Questions?
Right.
All right, here is number 4. They're just the same. Those are vertical angles. Vertical angles are congruent. All right, pick one of these and draw it. Either draw A or draw B. We're going to do both as a class, but you can just have one in your notes. So just pick one, example 4, and do it. I'll give you a second to draw, and then we'll go through both of them. In both, we're finding the measure of angle 1, the measure of angle 2, and the measure of angle 3 if you want to get them set up. I don't know.
Any does? Wait, do we have to write the little MC1 thing?
Yeah, so, or you could just put it right in the diagram if you want. Just indicate to me which one's which. So if you just want to put it right into the picture, I'm okay with that. If you want to make a list, 1, 2, 3 equals. We're finding all 3 of the missing angles now. So we have a few different things going on. In part A, I'll just tell you one of the angles is 20 degrees. Is it 1, 2, or 3? 2. How do you know that angle 2 is 20 degrees? These are vertical angles. They're right across from each other. They make those V's pointing in. They're vertical. They're the same, 20 degrees. Okay? That's the easier one. Now, these two, the 20-degree angle and angle 1, make what kind of pair? They're a linear pair. See how they make a line? When I put them together, I have a line. So they should add to what? 180. So if I do 180 minus 20, I have 160. Good. Now, if this is 160, what's angle 3? Also 160 because they're a pair of vertical angles. Everybody see that? So once you fill it in, you can sort of go around and double check. Angles next door add to 180. These two 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 add to 180. And then like across the street, those are congruent. Okay? Questions? Okay, in part B, which is the easiest one to find? 1, 2, or 3? 1. Why is 1 so easy to find? They're vertical angles. So what is the measure of angle 1? 130. Good. Now, the next door neighbor is a little harder to find. We can go with 3 first. These are what? A linear pair. Very good. I can tell because they make a line when I put them together. Linear pairs add to what? 180. So I can do 180 minus 130, and what do I get? 50 degrees and 50 degrees. Very good. And the reason that angle 3 and angle 2 are the same is because they're a pair of vertical angles as well. Shh, you guys need to be. What are your questions?
So if they're across from each other, they're the
Same.
same. Okay? They're side by side.
Yeah.
They add to their linear pair, which adds to.
Perfect. Lots happening today. All right, everyone's favorite part.
I sense this. It still seems.
Okay. Go ahead and just write the equations with me. If you already started drawing the angles, just finish it up. But if you didn't start yet, you can just write what I'm about to write. What do I know about the 2 angles on part A? They're a linear pair. Perfect. They're right next door. They make a line. Linear pair. And what do I know about a linear pair? What do you mean go to 180?
Equals 180.
Equals 180 when I what?
When you set them equal to each other.
We don't set them equal to each other. We set them equal to what did you guys just say? 180.
Oh, so
But what do I need to do with the 2 angles to make 180? Add them. So you take this angle plus this angle equal 180. That's the hardest part of this whole problem. From here, it's just the stuff you've been doing last year in algebra, right? How do I solve this? It's 40 when you add them, right? Like terms. And then subtract 40 from both sides. What does x equal? 140. Good. So again, since they're right next door, making a line, they're a linear pair, and linear pairs add to 180. All right, what do I know about part B? These are vertical, so they're congruent. Congruent means what? The same. The same means
Equal.
equal. Good. The answer is what? 12. Good. And if you're ever like, I just don't know if this feels right, you can put the x part back in. If you make this 140 on part A, 140 plus 10 plus 30 does equal 180. If you make the x 12 here, 12 times 2 is 24, and they're equal. So you can stop, kind of pause, reflect a little bit, plug it back in, see if you're right. A lot of you turn those quizzes and tests in with like half the class left. I mean, you could spend that time checking to see if your answers actually do make sense or not. Which is what I would do, but you know.
but what if you know that part?
I mean, this would just make you double short.
I'm not. Oh.
Sorry. My bad.
Thank you. Okay, no, I'm done.
All right. Today we learned
About congruent and linear. Thank you. Linear angles.
the congruent ones had a special name. They were called vertical angles and linear pairs. Good. All right, and honestly, my favorite way to ask this on a test, I'll just give you a little preview of that, is like the ones we did in the middle of the lesson where I'll give you one angle and I'll say fill in the other three. That really shows me that you understand all the relationships, so that's a really good sample test question, okay? So keep that in mind. You do have a test next week. Do you guys have any questions before homework time?